All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. We're looking at the absolute most scientifically validated way to figure out exactly who you are. I mean, we've all spent time trying to figure out what makes us tick, right? Why we react the way we do, or, why our friends or coworkers seem to be operating on a totally different wavelength. Well, today, in just the next few minutes, we're going to unpack the literal gold standard of personality psychology. No horoscopes here, no pop psychology buzzwords. We're talking about decades of rigorous, cross-cultural research distilled down into the essential building blocks of human behavior.
So you've probably taken a test like the MBTI at some point, right? The kind that tries to put you neatly into one of these little binary boxes. Are you a thinker or a feeler? A judger or a perceiver? Introvert, extrovert? We love these categories. They're simple, they're super easy to remember, and honestly, they give us a nice sense of belonging to a specific type. But, as you might guess, human nature is rarely that black and white.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that modern psychology actually rejects those strict categories entirely. Instead, they favor a fluid continuum. Think of a massive studio mixing board. That is exactly what your personality is like. You aren't just one thing or another. You actually possess this totally unique combination of levels across several different dimensions.
So instead of these rigid types, the scientific gold standard is the Big Five model. You might know it by the acronym OCEAN. It measures 5 broad dimensions on a sliding scale: openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. You don't just have or lack these traits. Literally every single person on Earth falls somewhere on the spectrum for each of these 5 dials. So let's break down exactly what each dial represents, and hey, as we go through these, I really want you to think about where your own sliders might be set.
Okay, first up is the O in OCEAN, openness to experience. This dial contrasts the highly creative novelty seekers against the incredibly practical routine lovers. If your dial is cranked high here, you're probably super imaginative. You love abstract stuff like art and philosophy, and you are totally comfortable with change. But if you score lower, you prefer the tried and true. You're traditional, practical, and you absolutely thrive on a predictable routine. So the question is, how often do you actively seek out entirely new experiences versus just sticking to familiar, comfortable routines?
Next dial, conscientiousness. This is where we compare the hardcore, color-coded planner enthusiasts to the highly spontaneous folks. A high score means you've got incredible impulse control. You're disciplined, you're reliable, you are goal-directed. A lower score points to someone who is way more flexible, maybe a bit disorganized and definitely prone to spontaneity, or, let's be real, maybe a little procrastination. Ask yourself, how important is it for you to keep strict commitments and meet rigid deadlines, or do you just prefer to go with the flow?
Now for extraversion. This one is really all about where you draw your energy. It's not just about being shy versus loud. Highly extroverted people literally gain energy from their environment and social interaction. It fuels them. On the flip side, those on the lower end of the dial, who we usually call introverts, they might actually really enjoy social events, but they find them fatiguing. They need that quiet time to replenish their batteries. Do you feel recharged by a bustling social gathering, or do you desperately need alone time after a party?
Moving right along to agreeableness. This dial focuses entirely on how we interact with other people. It ranges from the highly empathetic, team-oriented peacemakers on one side to the skeptical debaters on the other. High scorers are soft-hearted, trusting, and incredibly cooperative. They are the glue holding groups together. Low scorers? They're more demanding, highly competitive, and totally willing to engage in conflict to protect their interests or just argue a really good point. How willing are you to comprise and put your own needs aside just to keep the peace?
And finally, we have neuroticism. This measures your emotional stability, contrasting high volatility with a calm resilience. Essentially, this dial tracks how you process negative emotions and environmental threats. A high score here means you might frequently experience anxiety, worry, and mood swings. A lower score points to a laid-back, highly secure temperament that bounces back from stress really quickly. When sudden problems pop up out of nowhere, do you react with immediate worry, or do you manage to maintain a calm, steady demeanor?
So why does all this matter? Well, looking at the data, it's incredibly clear that the Big Five isn't just theoretical. The specific settings on your dials actually predict major life outcomes. It's pretty wild. For example, high openness strongly correlates with creativity and holding progressive, liberal political views. Meanwhile, conscientiousness is hands down the strongest predictor of workplace performance and long-term financial stability. Extroverts? They tend to report higher overall happiness and emerge as leaders. Agreeableness is linked to serious relationship stability and higher volunteering rates. But on the flip side, high neuroticism unfortunately carries higher risks for job burnout and certain physical health issues. We're looking at this totally neutrally, but the correlations are undeniable.
And it doesn't stop at the big life events. Your traits literally dictate your mundane daily habits too. In terms of mental health, neuroticism acts as a primary risk factor for anxiety and distress. But conscientiousness, that actually creates psychological resilience because those individuals are so good at sticking to healthy routines. And get this, studies show extroverts actually check their smartphones more frequently and they use them for longer periods once they're unlocked. What about high openness? Research shows you're way more likely to prefer watching complex documentaries over conventional family movies. I mean, your personality mixing board is literally influencing your Netflix queue right now.
Now here is a massive takeaway. Between 40 and 60% of your personality variance is highly heritable. Yeah, 40 to 60%, meaning it is literally hardwired by your genetics. Twin studies have proven this over and over again. The baseline settings on your Big Five mixing board are deeply influenced by the DNA you got from your parents. You didn't completely choose your personality. To a very large degree, you were just born with it.
Let's actually look at how this maps directly onto our brain chemistry, because modern neuroscience using fMRI scans is showing us some amazing stuff. Extraversion is literally linked to increased activity in the brain's dopamine reward system. That perfectly explains why extroverts are constantly seeking out external excitement. Conscientiousness correlates with the volume of your prefrontal cortex. That's the area responsible for planning and self-control. And neuroticism is tied directly to an overactive amygdala, basically the brain's primary stress and threat detection center. So these traits aren't just ideas, they are physical realities inside your skull.
And these traits aren't just quirky human things either. Evolutionary psychologists actually believe that different levels on these dials helped our ancient ancestors survive. High agreeableness helped foster tribal cooperation, while a healthy dose of neuroticism kept early humans hypervigilant against, getting eaten by predators. And amazingly, we even see analogs of the Big Five in the animal kingdom. Researchers have found distinct, consistent personalities in chimpanzees, dogs, cats, and even fish. This is a deep biological strategy for survival that predates humanity altogether. Okay, but here is what's truly wild about where we are today. Machine learning algorithms can accurately estimate your exact Big Five profile just by looking at your digital footprint. Seriously, by analyzing your social media likes, the words you use, your browsing patterns, AI can map out your ocean dials with shocking and maybe slightly terrifying precision. This tech is heavily used right now in targeted advertising and even political campaigns. It really highlights just how incredibly predictive this model is, and obviously the massive modern privacy concerns that come right along with it.
So, are your dials permanently glued in place? Well, your personality is highly stable throughout your adult life, for sure, but it's not entirely set in stone. Things like targeted cognitive behavioral therapy can absolutely help you manage high neuroticism. Plus, simply getting older tends to slightly adjust your dials organically. The research shows that as we age, we generally experience this natural increase in agreeableness and conscientiousness, while neuroticism and openness actually tend to dip slightly. Basically, we just naturally mellow out and get a bit more organized as the years go by.
The Big Five is just such an incredible lens to view human behavior through. It rescues us from those restrictive, unscientific boxes we always try to force ourselves into and replaces them with this rich, dynamic, and biologically rooted spectrum. It explains our careers, our relationships, our mental health, and even our smartphone habits. Which leaves us with one final thought to reflect on for this explainer. Knowing that your personality dictates your success, your happiness, and even how an AI targets you online, where exactly do your unique dials sit on the spectrum of you?